wrap up here. This, getting to religion. Again, religion like worldview, this could be an entire course. We could go through the entire course just talking about worldview or talking about religion. In fact, I taught an entire course at Radford University just on various theories of religion. Okay. One example, William James defined religion as the feelings, acts, and experiences of individual men in their solitude. Well, one of the issues with that, number one, is it's individual men. Now, I think based on when William James lived, he probably meant men to be people, but nevertheless, that's a patriarchal way of defining religion, right? Additionally, in their solitude, well, what about community, right? And so there are issues here. What about doctrines, right? You got feelings, acts, and experiences, but there's no beliefs there, right? Bruce Lincoln moves in a good direction with his 4 domains. There's discourse, what do you talk about? Practices, what do you do? Community, who are you a part of? And then institution, which is sort of like formalized, when these things start to really take shape. For our purposes, I want to think about religion as part of what we're looking at, though it will impact the frame as well, right? So mostly what I want to say is that religion is this stuff, okay? But religion is also, to some degree, this stuff as well, okay? So religion is going to shape what we see, but it is also a part of what we see, right? So there's some more definitions to look through. Before we look through those definitions, one really helpful quote here, Peter Berger said, "A definition of religion is not more or less true, only more or less useful." This is one of my favorite quotes for defining religion because this is just a great way to look at it. There isn't a definition of religion that works. We want to think of it in terms of functionality. There are definitions of religion that are helpful, and there are definitions of religion that are not helpful. Okay, so that's how we want to think about it. To start, there's this dialectical method by this guy named Hegel. Hegel's dialectical method is a demonstrative method whereby he explains the cyclic process of history. The process begins with a reflection on a concept's meaning and implications. The singular focus on the concept itself is what Hegel calls the imminent unfolding of a concept. So basically, he starts with a thesis. Thesis is opposed to the antithesis. And emerging from that conflict is a synthesis. That's the dialectical method, okay? So there's, an idea, and then somebody presents the opposite of the idea, and then emerging from the tension between the idea and the opposite of the idea is a synthesis that's somewhere in between those two things that finds a way forward. And then that way forward, it then turns back into a thesis, and now we have another antithesis. And emerging from that conflict, we have another synthesis. And then that synthesis eventually becomes another thesis. And you see how this works its way out. The idea here is that you're constantly moving forward. Okay. Now, I want to say, on some level, Hegel is obviously correct. If you have two ideas that are opposite of one another, and somebody finds a middle way, or somebody kind of blends the two ideas together, it's kind of like the commercial about that has the girl saying, "Why not both?" Right? the meme where she's, I think it was like a taco shell or something they were trying to sell, and they were like, "Let's have it this way, let's have it this way," and she says, "Why not both?" Right? That's thesis, antithesis, synthesis, right? Why not both, right? So on some level, Hegel's right, but it's when we push these ideas to their logical conclusion that we start to get in trouble. Okay, so here's an example of this. If you want to look at this in more detail, there's a book. This is the textbook that I used when I taught the theories of religion for that entire semester. 10 Theories of Religion by Daniel Pals really fleshes this out wonderfully. Okay, but just to summarize, if you take Hegel's ideas and you apply them to cultural anthropology, when you apply them to the development of humanity and where we come from and where we're going and all of that kind of stuff, what you get is that we're naturally evolving through the process of thesis versus antithesis yielding synthesis. This new synthesis is inherently superior to what came before because it's more refined. Well, the problem with that, and we see this in the works of early anthropologists, is the idea that we are literally superior to what came before us. So is our approach to the world. So this artwork here, this is emerging from that worldview, and it's looking back on these people and saying, oh, these savages, right? This is how they approached the world, and they're savage, and we've evolved from that, right? Well, early study of ancient religion basically said, well, all we have to do to get back to these savages is we have to unwind the Hegelian progression that got us here. So we have to go back to the less evolved. Now, and they're not necessarily talking about actual biological evolution here, just let me be clear. They're talking about the evolution of culture and evolution of religion, right? There may be touches of like actual biological evolution here, but the main idea is that like the way that we do things is evolving, especially with regard to religion. But it still ends up ultimately being racist because you're saying that these cultures that do things this way, we have evolved beyond that. And so they're less than us. They're less intelligent than us. They're less evolved than us. They're less developed than us, etc., etc. This is wildly influential in the study of religion and defining religion. And again, like I said, if you read 10 Theories of Religion by Daniel Pals, it's just everywhere, right? So let's look at a couple of these definitions, okay? Emile Durkheim says beliefs and practices that unite a moral community. You can see here, implicit within this, I mean, initially this doesn't seem bad, but implicit within this is sort of a pluralism that says there's no real right answer here. Your religion just is whatever you believe or whatever you practice within a particular community that has something to do with morality, right? So that's all there is. Freud says religion would thus be a universal obsessional neurosis of humanity, like the obsessional neurosis of children. It arose out of the Oedipus complex, out of the relation to the father. The Oedipus complex is his idea that every man wants to sleep with his mother. That's Freud. That's at the heart of most modern psychology. So there's that. Notice here, he's saying this is, obsessional neurosis of humanity. It arose, right? It's evolving. It's developing. And so this is coming out of an earlier thing, right? Karl Marx, religion is the self-consciousness and self-feeling of man who has either not yet found himself or has already lost himself again. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, just as it is the spirit of a spiritless situation. It is the opium of the people. So religion is what helps us, get through the day, right? Then Paul Tillich's actually a theologian. Paul Tillich calls it the ultimate concern, whatever is most important, whatever is ultimately real, that sort of thing. What's worth pointing out here, based on those definitions, is according to Freud, religion functions as an unhealthy but soothing buffer against the inner terrors of the psyche. Marx, religion functions in a similarly unhealthy manner as an opiate that deters suffering, the suffering individual from attending to the true cause of the affliction. But neither Freud nor Marx ever actually tried to define religion. Rather, they tried to explain it away. They basically just say it's a bad thing, and here's what it's doing, so it's bad. They don't actually try to talk about like what is it, what is it doing, what is the kind of definitional element of religion? How can we say something is a religion when something else isn't a religion, right? How do we distinguish those things? They don't do that. Okay. A better approach, and like I said, we can go through this in an entire course. There's a lot to this. My favorite approach is by a guy named Ninian Smart, and Ninian Smart, we'll talk about him next week, and we'll go through his approach a bit next week. It's a little bit more detailed, but it's similar to Prothero's four-part approach. What Prothero says, this is kind of like the easiest to grasp and most helpful definition of religion. Remember, going back to Peter Berger, definitions of religion aren't necessarily more or less true, they're more or less useful. This is more useful. Prothero says what the world's religions share is not so much a finish line. Not all world religions are going to the same thing. Not everybody's going to the same place. Not everybody's climbing the same mountain. Yada, yada, yada. Not so much a finish line, but as a starting point. And where they begin is with this simple observation: something is wrong with the world. I think that observation is perfect. Every world religion starts with things are not the way that we think they should be. Now, everybody disagrees on what the problem is. So there's one important commonality to all religions: something's wrong with the world. But past that, Christianity says the world's marred by sin. Buddhists say that attachment drives suffering. Hinduism says we live in Kali Yuga, which is the worst age in history. Okay? They don't agree on what the problem is. And if they don't agree on what the problem is, they don't agree on what the solution is. Okay? So Prothero's four-part approach in defining a religion is he says there's a problem. Each religion phrases the problem differently. Based on that problem, there's a solution in each religion, which is tailored to the problem. And then there's a technique which is connected to the solution. This is how we do this. And then usually there's an exemplar that actually does this thing, right? The person who actually goes through the technique, achieves the solution, and shows us how we can fix all of the things. I think this is probably the easiest to grasp definition of religion that helps us kind of get our hands around what do we mean when we say religion. So we can see that religion and worldview are not synonymous. Okay, to conclude here. After all, there are atheistic worldviews, and so you can't have, unless you want to admit atheism as a religion, which there's debate there, and that sort of thing. But we also see that religion and worldview overlap considerably. So our best approach here is to consider religion as a part of your worldview, but a part that impacts your entire worldview. So for each religion, we're going to talk about the elements that comprise the religion, and then we're going to talk about how those elements influence their worldview. Okay? I know this was a lot, kind of drinking from a fire hose. Feel free to speed it up or slow it down or whatever. There's some AI tools that can summarize this stuff for you if you need some help. I particularly am fond of a Chrome plugin called Monica that's particularly helpful, but your mileage may vary. As always, if you have any questions, send me an email. We can talk through some of this stuff, and I'll see you guys next week.